Unless you're new here, you're already aware I am a fanatic when it comes to the E30 M3, and I'd argue it's one of the best cars ever built. And you don't have to take my word for it either. The record books have already established it. The M3 is the winningest car in touring car history. It is, by nearly every measure, unrivaled. But there is one exception. You see, BMW had a bit of a rivalry with the folks in Stuttgart. No, not Porsche. I'm talking about Mercedes-Benz. Giving the E30 M3 a run for its money was the 190E. Mercedes brought its own potent recipe to the circuit in the form of a sedan fitted with a high-revving twin-cam four-cylinder, much like we find under the hood of the E30 M3 itself. By 1991, utilizing the Evo II variant of the 190E, Mercedes managed to claim the throne and won the Deutsche Tourenwagen Meisterschaft, better known to us as DTM. And that victory cemented the 190E in motorsports history. So I will admit, the E30 M3 is the better car, but what I say next might just get me crucified by my own community, because I think the 190E Evo II is the cooler car. Mercedes truly turned the 190E platform up to 11 with this car, and then sold it to the public. And I don't think any gearhead could deny the fact that seeing one of these in person absolutely steals the spotlight from the E30. It is excessive by every measure, and it leaves the Evo II variant of the E30 M3 feeling lackluster by comparison. Now, the reason any of this stuff actually matters is because today we are at Copley West here in Costa Mesa, California, and right next to me is the real deal, an actual Mercedes 190E Evo II. And I don't know if I'm ever going to get a chance to see another one of these in person, so I had to come over here and see it for myself, and I figured if I want to come take a look at this, you guys probably do too, and we're going to take a look at all the details, but before we do that, let me give you guys a little bit of a history lesson. Known internally as the W201, the 190E's story begins all the way back in 1982. Believe it or not, the 190 was Mercedes' first compact car, but that doesn't mean that it came with a compact development budget. No, Mercedes spent more than $600 million developing this car, but in its defense, it is leagues beyond the cars that it succeeds. Manufacturing developments allowed the 190 to retain a relatively light weight, but also a high degree of safety. The car is also known for its handling prowess, in part because of its 5-link suspension, its anti-roll bars, and its anti-squat and anti-dive characteristics. In all, the 190 was an excellent car, and that's why Mercedes sold nearly 2 million of them over the course of its 11-year production run. And during that production run, they also introduced some special models. 1983 saw the introduction of the 2.316, nomenclature that explains its 2.3-liter inline-4 with 16 overhead valves. This was marketed as the performance variant of the 190, and in 1984, it was put to the test. To celebrate the opening of the all-new Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit, Mercedes hosted the Nürburgring Race of Champions, which featured 20 identical 2.316 190Es, piloted by the 20 best drivers in the world. Names like James Hunt, Jack Brabham, Sterling Moss, and Niki Lauda only scratched the surface. On the grid were 9 of the 14 living Formula One world champions of the time and 2 future ones. That's the most of any major race in history. Not only did it lay some incredible foundations for the 2.316, it also laid the groundwork for the rise of Ayrton Senna, who won the race to the surprise of many, beating out some of the best drivers on Earth. So the 2.316 was a success, but BMW's E30 M3 was outperforming it. So Mercedes responded with the Evolution 1. The most obvious difference, of course, are the fender flares and radius arches, along with the rear wing. But Mercedes also reworked the suspension and brakes, and while the power output of the engine is the same, it received a larger bore and shorter stroke for a higher rev limit. Now, only 502 of these cars were built to meet DTM regulations so that Mercedes could effectively take it racing. So, needless to say, it's rare, and if you're asking me, the Evo 1 is my favorite variant of 190E, in part due to its somewhat understated nature. If you didn't know better, you might assume this was a normal car. But I don't think that same potential misconception exists for the Evo II, the ultimate 190E. In contrast to its predecessors, it looks like a race car built for the street. Its wide over fenders are beautiful, but certainly far from understated, and the aero package from the rear wing to the big front splitter make it clear this car means business. But just look at it. It is, without question, one of the coolest four-door sports cars ever built. To put it simply, I think Mercedes was completely off their rocker when they sent this to production. So now that we're on the same page, I actually want to take a look at this thing and see what it's made of, but if you're expecting me to drive this car in this episode, I'm going to break your heart right now. I can't even begin to afford the insurance policy it would cost to do that, because these things are bringing over $300,000 at auction. I'm not touching it. But that doesn't mean we can't still admire it and see what makes this car incredible. The Evo II was first unveiled in March of 1990 at the Geneva Auto Show, and believe it or not, all of the production units were sold before the car was even unveiled, thanks to the success of the Evo I. This one is number 209 of 502, despite what the shift knob says. It retailed for around 130,000 Deutschmarks, or, in the US dollars of 1990, 85,000. Adjust that for inflation, and we're talking about a car that cost $200,000 off the showroom floor. And that might not sound insane by today's standards where we're used to such figures, but back in the day, this was one very expensive car. But on paper, I think it's rather justifiable because, for starters, under the hood, the 2.5-liter engine produces 232 horsepower, which is incredible given that it's almost 35 years old. To pair with the engine, of course, there's the bodywork, which cannot be ignored on this car. On top of allowing it to fit much larger tires, the wide bodywork also reduced the drag coefficient of the car down to just 0.29. And then, of course, there's the enormous rear wing. Rumor has it that the chief of BMW Research and Development stated that the laws of aerodynamics must be different between Munich and Stuttgart, and that if that rear wing works, we'll have to redesign our wind tunnel. And, as you might guess, BMW did redesign it. BMW wasn't the only one to give them flack for it, though. The German government had rules in place that said the rear view out of the car cannot be obstructed by the rear wing. You know, to keep people from bolting race car parts onto street cars. But Mercedes wasn't having it, and their workaround was incredible. It was the ultimate middle finger to bureaucracy. They simply blocked out the top half of the rear window so that the wing didn't actually obstruct any of the view. And somehow it worked. One of the things that makes the 190 so spectacular in contrast to the E30 M3 is the fact that it is a sedan. This thing was never meant to be a sports car in its initial inception, but they turned it into one, and that's celebrated by the fact that this car not only has bolstered front seats, the rear seats are bolstered too. You're meant to take this thing along with 3 people and go carve mountain roads or even a racetrack, and then you can still take it to the grocery store when you're done. And I don't know what's cooler than that, especially given that it looks like a DTM race car. And it was the Evo II that finally earned Mercedes its first DTM championship, having beat out BMW and Audi, who just completed a pair of back-to-back championship wins in 1990 and 1991. In fact, it ushered in an era of dominance because to date, not one other brand has more DTM championships to their name than Mercedes-Benz. It makes for one of many reasons that the Evo II is a motorsports legend. And thus, it's fitting we'd find this car at our friends at Copley West, right down the street from the Stanceworks headquarters, where we can find all sorts of incredible machines, ranging from vintage Ferraris to radical track cars to an assortment of Land Rover Defenders. The cars that move in and out of this facility are incredible, but despite that, I still come back to this one sole Mercedes. And that's hard for me to admit as a die-hard BMW fan, but this car is just special. It's as simple as that. So to be given the opportunity to spend time up close and personal with it is something I will be stoked on for years to come, and I hope that you guys enjoyed an up close and in-depth look at this machine too. If this wasn't what you were looking for on the channel today, worry not, we'll be back in the shop next week. However, if this video does well and you guys liked this format, even though it's not normally what we do here on the channel, let us know, and if it does well, maybe in the future we will get to drive cars like this and do more out and about and explore more of the car culture that I am obsessed with, because I'm just excited to come over here and see this car, and I figured if I'm excited, you guys would be excited to see it too. So leave those comments, leave a like, share it with your friends, and let's make this episode do well, and we'll do more like it. Again, thank you to Copley West for letting us come over here and see this car in person. I don't know when I'll ever get the chance to do this again. Even just to get to sit behind the wheel was a true treat. So thank you, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.